that I consider this to be one of the most significant presentations, and if I could encourage, not if, when I do, this is the one technique I ask everyone to at least try and participate in. Incorporate this into your studying, whether it's before you go to class, whether it's during class, after class, when you're reviewing, preparing for an exam, you're doing this. Having a look at that outline, we're going to look at analogy with puppies and your mind. We're going to talk about the key. We're going to see how we can apply that key in our lectures and when we're reading in a textbook. Imagine you're in your first class on a Monday. The lecture's sitting there, the professor's getting started, and he goes over to the main lecture door and he opens it up, and 30 of these cute guys come running in. And you've got 30 little puppies now running around. They're running around, they're sniffing people, they're running over to the next person, they're looking around everywhere, they're going up the stairs, they're falling down the stairs, people are probably picking them up, they're now running on the tables, they're going around, they're sniffing people, they're going from people to people. Some of them might end up feeling tired or falling asleep, some of them may go for a pee in the corner, some of them are going to be barking, some of them are going to be just running around, some of them are going to be just sitting there just looking around what's going on. This kind of is very similar to the way our mind works. We can be in a lecture, and just like those puppy dogs, your mind can jump from one idea to another idea to another idea. You could be listening to the professor and he says a keyword, and all of a sudden that causes you to think about what happened on The Bachelor last night, or the party that you're going to attend on Saturday, or oh, you need to buy groceries, or you haven't done your laundry yet and you really need to get that done. Your mind jumps from idea to another idea to idea to idea and back again. And you tune in and out of that lecture. I've probably been talking now for about 3 minutes, I think, and you've probably already done this. During the past 3 minutes, you've probably thought about something else you need to be doing instead of giving your full attention to what's happening in the presentation. So how can we resolve this? I'm going to make an argument that the key to learning, psychologists will say that I must actively engage with the material. If I really want to learn, I must actively engage with this material. What does that mean? How could we say that another way? We must think about the material. I have to think about it. I can't just read it. I can't just look at it. I can't just hear it. I need to think about this material. But what makes up the stages of thinking? How do we usually start about thinking about new material? If I've got to think about it, how do we typically think about things? What is usually the very first step that we do when we start to think about new material or even old material? I'm going to make the case that we typically start by asking questions. We ask questions, and this helps us to engage. This helps us to think about the material. So we're going to have to start asking questions. Sitting in your lecture theater, I want you to think of it this way. Your professor has maybe done some of the research, or they're using information from textbooks and other researchers that have gone and asked questions and then found answers. Now this professor is teaching you those answers. They're showing you evidence from experiments. They're talking about theories that these researchers have come up with. So every piece of information that professor gives out is really an answer to a question. Think of it another way, is that eventually, to test your knowledge, that professor is going to ask you to answer questions about what he taught you. So again, this is a double whammy. The question helps us to engage with the material and to think about it, and it also helps us to prepare for how we're going to be tested. What I want to demonstrate is just a few different types of questions that we can look at. We're going to look at recapping questions, reflecting, and reasoning, and where they kind of fit in. So the first one, recapping a question, we typically just look at a heading of a slide or a heading in a chapter section, and we just turn it into a question. It usually is a big answer. It'll be a big question and it will include a lot of information in its answer. So it usually summarizes a large portion of the material. Reflection question is the one that's the smaller details. So we might end up having 4 or 5 of these types of questions answer a recapping question. So we can go through when we're reading a paragraph, we read a sentence, we see, oh, that's a definition. All right, I'm just going to write down what is blah, blah, blah. We might see keywords of cause and effect, and we'll ask that. We'll see comparisons. Oh, what is the difference? We can go through and ask all these different types of questions. As we're reading, we just read something. What kind of question would this be an answer to? Last one, reasoning questions are a little bit trickier. They're a little bit more intensive. Usually this is done after we've done some reading or any sort of information that really sparks your interest or your curiosity. It might beg some sort of question. They're asking you to really apply it to your own world. They're really powerful in that they keep you emotionally involved. You might be sitting there thinking right now, oh my gosh, this is the last thing I want to be doing. I don't want to be asking questions about my material. You're saying that there could be that sparking your thinking. You're already thinking about it. You're using that method as a way of applying it to what's relevant for you. You might say, oh, well, I could see, actually, you know what, in my sociology course, I could probably ask a lot of these questions. This does make sense. Then you're thinking, but how does that compare to my math class? Does this really apply? And maybe I can't see that. Does it really apply? And that there again, you're asking questions and you're thinking about material. That's a kind of reasoning question. The answers won't be in your textbook. The answers won't be in your slides. These are questions that you'd have to infer or think about and come up with your own. You have to make a judgment call. And that there's a very high level of thinking. That's where we want to be at. So let's have a look at an application of these. We've got here a lecture from linguistics. There's the whole lecture. This is all the slides. Give yourself a bird's eye view. If you printed them out, I printed them out online. Doesn't matter how you print them out. This is just for viewing purposes. We'll see that there's headings. And actually these headings already have a question, so I'm just going to write those down straight away. Boom. What is language? What is communication? Great, I can do that. I can even ask a little bit higher question saying, oh, okay, maybe these are two separate things. What's the difference? Maybe that's another way of looking at it. Instead of just getting a definition and a definition, I could also say, okay, let's define these about how they're different. And again, another way of thinking about the material. Next is another heading. This one's not as a question, so I just have to turn it into a question. Here I can see it does say perspective, so that immediately makes me think, you know what? There's more than one perspective here. If I have a quick look down here, I can see that there's 3 models. So looking at these 3 models, I could even go further and just quickly skip ahead and say, okay, here's one heading, here's another model, and that one's continued. I'm guessing the next page has the last model. So I can go back and my question can just be straightforward. What are the 3 models of communication? There's a group of things. They're under this. They're related to communication. So let's talk about them together, not separate. Going back, we can see that we've got each of these, and now what do each of these slides talk about? If we have a quick look in here, there's some sort of diagram describing it. Here, if we read this, it talks about some sort of description of how the process works. This one here talks again, communication involves this thing. So each model just tells you how they work. So my question is just going to be straightforward. How does each model work? So I know that there's 3 models, and I can just plug in here. This one here might even help me to cue the answers for the next ones. If I turn the page, I can see there's that 3rd model again. Now I've got another heading. What is nonverbal communication? Nonverbal communication. Let's have a look at these. Going into a little bit closer detail, we could see that it was just talking about the function. So I used that as the keyword and saying, okay, what are the functions of nonverbal communication? That was what was in that heading. If we go back, we come into an interesting scenario here is that we have one side here that's talking about similarities and differences between verbal and nonverbal. Okay, so there's similarities and differences there. That's going to be my keyword for my question there. And then I see that this heading here is all the same. So this here is just talking about what's it talking about. So we have to go down to, not only can we use the heading of the slide, but we can use the subheading or this first bullet point here, this main one. So if we go into each of these, we can see that there's types. So this one here lists a whole bunch of types of nonverbal communication. And then here it goes on to explain just a few of them a little bit further. So my question is just going to be pretty straightforward. What are the similarities and differences from that first slide between that? So I just turn that first heading into a question. And then I'm just going to ask, what are the 7 types of nonverbal communications? 7 types could be difficult to use, but this is a good place to start. Then for each one, I'm just going to use either an explain or a what is question. Explain what kinesics is the study of. And then you just go through, boom, 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 done. That there's a really good example of applying it to that. We could use that as a preview if you get your notes before if you get your notes before you go to class, and you can use this as a review. You could even use it during class. So there's a very quick way. This here also gives you the benefit of having those questions forever. Now that you have them, you can quickly review those. So instead of rereading notes, now you're engaging actively and thinking about the material by asking questions. You already have those questions. Maybe 2 days later, before you come to your next class, you quickly go through those questions and you're getting a quick review of what was going on in that one, in that class. And if you get the answer wrong, it's okay. You can go and look up the answer. It's alright. You're still learning. It's not going to happen after the very first read through. We need to practice answering and asking and answering these questions. What we're going to quickly look at now is just a quick textbook here. I'm going to pull up chapter 5 of a statistics textbook. I've got my little, let's get it over here. I've already given it a title, and I've got discrete random variables and their probability distributions. Okay, so all I've done is I've just copied the title down. I've given it that it's chapter 5, and we can see here these are going to be the main headings. So I've already got our main headings in here. These are probably going to all have their own subheadings, but I can go through and just quickly write all of these in and show these as questions immediately. Or I can go through and just do it while reading. So I can go through each of these pages and just get to my heading and turn it into a question. What is a random variable? I look down here and I can see, oh, here's the answer. Here is what a random variable is. I could also read through each of these paragraphs and maybe come up with a few more questions as I'm going through. Here I've got random variables, then I've got discrete random variables. Boom, next question. What is a discrete random variable? So I'm just going to go back here and just show that title, and I'll be back in 1 second as I get that. Okay, now I'm back, and I've just taken the blue headings here of 5.1, 2, 3, and 4, and I've just put them here in blue as well. So I've just taken those 4 and I've just turned them into questions. Exactly as random variables, what is a random variable? Then I've gone on and I've just gone on to read just a little bit, and so I just went in and had a quick look at this table, and this table said frequency and relative frequencies. So I thought, okay, well, what is the difference between a frequency and the relative frequency? So I put that down as a question. I'm not looking for answers at the moment. Then I just went on to the next part. Here's my random variable. Here's my answer to my first one. So I'm going to make a note of that, maybe read over that one. The next heading is discrete random variable. So what is a discrete random variable? That's my next question. Where's my answer? My answer's right there. So I keep going through. The next thing down here, I get a list of points here. And so there, actually, if I go on and read a little bit more, some examples. So immediately I get to say, oh, look, here's some examples of a discrete random variable. So I get to put down what are 3 of them. If I keep turning over the page, I get to see continuous random variable. What is a continuous random variable? My very next question for that would be immediately, before I even think about it, I already know, what are 3 examples of a CRV? Using abbreviations is really helpful. It'll speed you up a little bit as well. So we can keep going through just like that. We just go through and we read stuff and we just put down questions. I get to go on to the second one here. Probability distribution of a discrete random variable. Boom, what is that? What is this distribution? What is it? Again, we get our relative frequency popping up again. We get probability. If we have a quick read in here, we might notice that it does say something about probability. Maybe there's a relationship. I'm seeing them both pop up, so I need to have a